The moment Elena saw her husband's taillights disappear into the blizzard, she realized he wasn't coming back, and her first contraction hit so hard she collapsed face-first into the snow, completely alone on an abandoned mountain road with no phone, no shelter, and a baby determined to be born tonight. At 34 weeks pregnant, in sub-zero temperatures, with darkness falling fast, Elena Vasquez had exactly 1 hour to find help, or she and her unborn daughter would become two more frozen bodies that wouldn't be discovered until spring. The 26-year-old woman, with her warm olive skin now turning pale from the cold, her dark brown hair whipping against her face, and her thin maternity dress doing nothing to protect her from the brutal December wind, crawled toward the tree line because staying on the road meant certain death. Her husband Marcus had just driven away with everything, her wallet, her phone, her dignity, leaving her stranded 15 miles from the nearest town because she had finally discovered his secret. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that her nightmare would lead her to a love story so extraordinary that it would eventually be told around the world. But first, she had to survive the next 60 minutes. Elena's hands were already turning blue as she pulled herself beneath the partial shelter of a massive pine tree, its branches heavy with snow creating a small cave-like space underneath. She thought about her mother's warnings, the ones she had ignored 3 years ago when she married Marcus Rodriguez despite everyone telling her something was wrong with that man. He had been charming, successful on paper, and had promised her the world. Instead, he had given her isolation, control, and eventually, cruelty that escalated month by month. She had stayed because she believed in her vows, because she thought the baby would change him, because she was terrified of being alone. Now, clutching her belly as another contraction ripped through her body, she realized that being alone was nothing compared to being with someone who wanted you dead. The contractions were coming faster now, every 8 minutes, and Elena knew enough about childbirth to understand that she was progressing rapidly. Her body was doing what it was designed to do, completely indifferent to the fact that she was lying on frozen ground in a snowstorm. She bit down on her sleeve to keep from screaming, not because anyone would hear her, but because some primal part of her brain insisted she needed to conserve energy. The temperature was dropping fast, she guessed it was already below 20 degrees, and the wind chill made it feel much worse. Her legs had stopped shaking, which terrified her more than the pain because she knew that meant hypothermia was setting in. She thought about the moment everything had changed, just 3 hours ago, when she had discovered the other phone hidden in Marcus's desk drawer. The messages had revealed everything, another wife, another family, another set of lies that stretched back 5 years before he had even met Elena. He wasn't a pharmaceutical sales representative who traveled for work, he was a con artist who married vulnerable women, drained their savings, and moved on. Elena had no savings to drain, she had given him everything already, but the baby had made her a liability. When she confronted him, his handsome face had twisted into something unrecognizable, and she had seen for the first time the monster that had always lived behind his dark eyes. The drive into the mountains had been his solution. The abandoned road, the shortcut he insisted on taking, the argument that ended with him pushing her out of the moving car, it had all been planned. He expected the cold to do what he wouldn't do with his own hands. Another contraction, stronger than the last, and Elena felt something shift inside her. The baby was coming whether she was ready or not. She pulled off her thin coat and spread it beneath her, knowing she would need something to catch the child. Her dress was soaked through, but she managed to position herself against the tree trunk, using gravity to help with what was about to happen. She had watched childbirth videos, had read every book during her pregnancy, had prepared meticulously for this moment in a hospital surrounded by doctors and nurses. None of that preparation had included giving birth alone in a snowstorm while possibly being hunted by a man who wanted her dead. She laughed, a wild sound that bordered on hysteria, and then she pushed. The next 20 minutes were a blur of agony and determination. Elena pushed when her body demanded it, rested when she could, and prayed to a God she wasn't sure was listening. The snow continued to fall, the wind continued to howl, and somewhere in the distance, she heard what might have been a wolf or might have been her imagination creating new terrors. She didn't scream, didn't have the energy for it, but tears streamed down her face and froze on her cheeks. This was not how her daughter was supposed to enter the world. This was not the life Elena had imagined when she saw those two pink lines 8 months ago. But maybe, she thought as she pushed one final time with everything she had left, maybe this was the life they were supposed to fight for. The cry that split the winter air was the most beautiful sound Elena had ever heard. Small, fierce, and absolutely furious at being thrust into such a cold world, her daughter announced her arrival like a warrior entering battle. Elena caught the baby with trembling hands, pulling her immediately against her chest and covering her with the only dry piece of fabric she had, the inner layer of her dress. The umbilical cord still connected them, but Elena knew she couldn't cut it with nothing sterile, so she kept the baby close and used her body heat to warm the tiny creature who was already rooting around looking for food. "I've got you," Elena whispered through chattering teeth. "I've got you, my love." But the danger was far from over. Elena's body was failing rapidly now, the blood loss from childbirth combining with the hypothermia to create a deadly equation. Her vision was blurring at the edges, her arms were getting heavy, and she knew that if she fell asleep, neither of them would wake up. The baby needed warmth, needed milk, needed medical attention that Elena couldn't provide. She estimated she had maybe 30 minutes before she lost consciousness, maybe less. The road was 100 feet away, invisible through the curtain of snow, and there was zero chance of anyone driving by on this abandoned stretch of mountain highway. Marcus had chosen well. He had found the perfect place to commit murder without ever having to pull a trigger. Elena felt her eyes closing, felt the darkness pulling her under, and she didn't know if the prayers she was whispering were for rescue or for a peaceful end. The headlights cut through the darkness like a message from heaven itself. At first, Elena thought she was hallucinating, her dying brain creating hope where none existed. But the rumble of an engine was real, massive and powerful, and she could see the shape of a semi-truck crawling through the storm. It was moving slowly, carefully, and it was going to pass right by her hiding spot without ever knowing she was there. She had one chance. Using strength she didn't know she had, Elena grabbed a snow-covered branch and dragged herself toward the road, clutching her newborn daughter against her chest with her other arm. The movement sent spikes of pain through her body, and fresh blood bloomed across the snow behind her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Her daughter deserved a chance at life, even if Elena didn't make it. 10 feet to the road. 5 feet. 3. The truck was almost past them when Elena pulled herself onto the pavement and waved the branch, a desperate signal that might have been invisible in the storm. The truck's brakes screamed against the ice, and for one terrible moment, Elena thought it was going to slide right into her. But it stopped, just barely, and a door flew open. A man jumped out, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy flannel jacket and work boots. He was running toward her before his feet even hit the ground, shouting something she couldn't understand over the wind. His face came into view, strong features, kind eyes crinkled with concern, a neatly trimmed beard covered in snowflakes, and he looked like every hero in every story she had ever read. He was perhaps 35, with deep brown skin that suggested mixed heritage, and hands that were surprisingly gentle as he reached for her. "Don't move," he ordered, his voice deep and commanding. "I've got you. Both of you." His name was Jackson Monroe, and he had been driving this route for 20 years despite the fact that he didn't need to work another day in his life. Elena didn't know that yet, didn't know that the man carefully lifting her into his heated cab was worth more money than she could comprehend, and Jackson preferred it that way. The Monroe family had built their fortune in logistics and transportation, but Jackson had always felt more at home behind the wheel of a truck than in a boardroom. He had been driving tonight because he loved the peace of the winter roads, and because some part of him had always believed that his life had a purpose he hadn't discovered yet. Looking at the half-frozen woman and the impossibly small baby in his arms, he wondered if this was the moment everything changed. The interior of the truck was warm, almost unbearably so after the cold outside, and Elena felt her body beginning to thaw in the most painful way possible. Jackson had already called for emergency services on his satellite phone, but the storm had closed the roads and helicopters were grounded. The nearest hospital was 3 hours away by normal driving conditions, which meant 6 or 7 hours in this weather. He made a decision. "My family has a cabin about 40 minutes from here," he told Elena, wrapping her in emergency blankets from his kit. "It's fully stocked, heated, and I can get a private medical team there by helicopter once the storm breaks. Can you hold on that long?" Elena nodded weakly, too exhausted to question why a truck driver had a cabin with a private medical team on call. All she knew was that this stranger had appeared in her darkest moment, and something in his eyes told her she could trust him. The drive to the cabin was tense, with Jackson checking on Elena every few minutes while navigating roads that had become nearly impassable. The baby nursed weakly, which Elena took as a good sign, and some color was returning to both their faces. Jackson talked to keep Elena awake, telling her about his childhood in Detroit, his years on the road, his belief that fate put people in each other's paths for a reason. He didn't mention his family's wealth, didn't mention the businesses that bore his name, didn't mention any of the things that usually made people treat him differently. He was just Jackson, a trucker who had found a woman in need, and for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The cabin was more of a mansion, though Elena was too exhausted to fully appreciate it. Jackson carried her inside, started a fire in the massive stone fireplace, and set up a makeshift medical station with supplies from an impressively stocked first aid room. He had clearly done this before. His hands were steady and confident as he checked vitals, cleaned wounds, and properly cut the umbilical cord with sterile equipment. Elena watched him through heavy eyes, this mysterious stranger who moved through the luxury cabin like he owned it, and she felt something stir in her chest that she thought Marcus had killed forever. Trust. Hope. Maybe even the first fragile seeds of something more. When she woke the next morning, the storm had passed, and a team of doctors was surrounding her bed. The baby, her daughter, whom she had decided to name Grace, was in a portable incubator, pink and healthy and being monitored by a pediatric specialist. Jackson was there too, sitting in a chair by the window, and he looked like he hadn't slept all night. "You're going to be fine," one of the doctors told her. "Both of you. It's honestly a miracle. You lost a lot of blood and you were severely hypothermic. If you had been out there another 10 minutes. The doctor didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Over the next few days, as Elena recovered her strength, she learned the truth about Jackson Monroe. The cabin belonged to his family. So did the transportation company whose trucks she had seen on highways her entire life. So did hotels, real estate developments, and a charitable foundation that had built hospitals in 12 countries. Jackson Monroe wasn't just a trucker, he was the heir to a billion-dollar empire who chose to spend his time on the road because he believed in staying connected to the people who actually built his family's wealth. When Elena discovered this, when she saw the news articles and the business magazine covers, she felt her heart sink. Men like him didn't end up with women like her. This was just charity, kindness, a rich man's noblesse oblige. She started making plans to leave. But Jackson had other ideas. "I've been alone for 5 years," he told her on her 4th night in the cabin, when Grace was sleeping peacefully and the firelight made everything seem softer. "I was engaged once, to a woman who loved my name and my money and nothing else. When she left, I told myself I was better off alone. I convinced myself that no one would ever see me as just Jackson, just a man who loves the open road and bad coffee and helping people when I can." He looked at her then, and his eyes were vulnerable in a way that took her breath away. "But you didn't know any of that. When you looked at me, you saw a trucker who pulled you out of the snow. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about what it would feel like to be seen like that for the rest of my life." Elena wanted to believe him. Every part of her wanted to fall into this fairy tale and never look back. But Marcus's betrayal was still fresh, still bleeding, and she couldn't trust her own judgment. "I'm broken," she told Jackson, her voice cracking. "The man I married tried to kill me. He threw me out of a car in a snowstorm because I found out he was a con artist. I have no money, no home, no family to speak of, and a newborn daughter who deserves better than a mother who can't even tell the difference between love and manipulation. You're a billionaire, Jackson. You could have anyone. Why would you want someone with my kind of baggage? Jackson's answer was to take her hand, gently, and hold it against his chest so she could feel his heartbeat. My grandfather built this company with his bare hands, he said. He used to tell me that the measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they do when they have nothing. You had nothing, Elena. Less than nothing. And you gave birth alone in a blizzard, crawled through the snow, and saved your daughter's life through sheer force of will. That's not broken. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen. And I would be honored, to spend whatever time you'll give me proving that not all men are like the one who hurt you. The weeks that followed were a slow dance of healing, trust, and something that felt increasingly like love. Jackson didn't push, didn't rush, didn't do any of the things that Marcus had done to sweep her off her feet before revealing his true nature. Instead, he showed up every day with small gestures, a cup of tea made just the way she liked it, a rocking chair he built himself for late-night feedings, books about parenting that he stayed up reading so he could help with Grace. He introduced her to his family cautiously, and they welcomed her not as a charity case but as someone their Jackson had chosen. His mother, a formidable woman who had built half the family's charitable work, pulled Elena aside one evening and said, "I've never seen my son look at anyone the way he looks at you. Whatever you decide, please be gentle with his heart. It's bigger than he lets people see." The shadow of Marcus still loomed, of course. He hadn't been found, hadn't been arrested, and Elena lived with the constant fear that he would appear and shatter her new world. Jackson hired security, contacted law enforcement, and used his considerable resources to track down the man who had tried to kill the woman he was falling in love with. The investigation revealed the full scope of Marcus's crimes: 4 other wives across 3 states, all of whom he had married and defrauded, 2 of whom had died under accidental circumstances that were now being reinvestigated. Elena was called to testify, to provide evidence, to relive the worst night of her life in service of putting a monster behind bars. And through all of it, Jackson was there, holding her hand, reminding her that she was safe, proving with every action that he was nothing like the man who had hurt her. The trial was brutal, lasting 3 weeks and dredging up every painful detail of Elena's marriage and near-death experience. But when the verdict came back, guilty on all counts, including 2 charges of attempted murder, Elena felt something shift inside her. A door closed. A chapter ended. She was free in a way she had never been before, and standing beside her was a man who had shown her what real love looked like. It wasn't manipulation or control or grand gestures designed to blind her to red flags. It was showing up, day after day, with patience and consistency and the kind of quiet devotion that didn't ask for anything in return. 6 months after Jackson found her in the snow, on a perfect spring evening with wildflowers blooming across the mountain meadows, he asked Elena to marry him. He did it simply, without fanfare, kneeling in the same spot where he had first lifted her into his truck. "I don't want you to say yes because you're grateful," he told her, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't want you to say yes because I can provide for you and Grace. I want you to say yes because you love me, and because you believe that we can build something beautiful together. If you're not sure, if you need more time, I will wait. I will wait forever if I have to. Because you, Elena Vasquez, are worth waiting for." Elena thought about everything she had survived: the abuse, the betrayal, the night in the snow that should have killed her. She thought about Grace, now a laughing, thriving 6-month-old who looked at Jackson like he hung the moon. She thought about the life she had imagined when she was young, before Marcus had taught her that dreams were dangerous, and she realized that this moment was better than any dream she had ever had. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I'll marry you. Not because you saved my life, Jackson. But because you showed me it was worth saving." Their wedding was held at the cabin where they had fallen in love, with Grace as the flower girl in a tiny dress that matched her mother's. Jackson's family filled the chairs, along with the doctors who had treated Elena, the truckers who worked for the Monroe Company, and two of Marcus's former victims who had become Elena's close friends through the trial. It was not a billionaire's wedding by conventional standards, no celebrity guests, no designer everything, no media coverage. It was simply two people promising to love each other in front of people who cared about them, and it was the most beautiful day of Elena's life. But the story doesn't end there, because happy endings are really just the beginning of something new. 5 years later, Elena Monroe sat in the passenger seat of Jackson's truck, watching the sun rise over the mountains as they drove one of his favorite routes together. Grace was at home with her grandparents, along with her twin brothers who had arrived 2 years ago, and this trip was a rare chance for Elena and Jackson to be alone. The company had grown, the foundation had expanded, and Jackson was now the official CEO, but he still made time to drive whenever he could. He said it kept him grounded, kept him connected to who he really was beneath the money and the responsibility. Elena understood that now. She had helped build the Foundation's new program for survivors of domestic violence, using her own experience to create resources that had already helped thousands of women. Her story had become a beacon of hope, shared on news programs and in magazines, inspiring people all over the world to believe that it was never too late to start over. As she looked at Jackson, his hand steady on the wheel, his eyes peaceful as he watched the road ahead, Elena felt a gratitude so deep it brought tears to her eyes. That night in the snow, she had been ready to die. She had given up on love, on hope, on the possibility that anything good could come from so much pain. But fate, or God, or the universe, or whatever force had put Jackson on that road at exactly the right moment, had other plans. She was not defined by what had happened to her. She was defined by what she had done next, by the courage it took to trust again, by the choice to believe that one man's cruelty did not represent what love could be. "What are you thinking about?" Jackson asked, reaching over to take her hand. "That night," Elena said softly. "And every night since. And how grateful I am that you stopped." Jackson lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, a gesture so tender and familiar that it still made her heart flutter after 5 years. "I've thought about that a lot," he admitted. "What would have happened if I had taken a different route? If I had left an hour earlier or later? If I had missed seeing you in the snow?" He shook his head, his voice thick with emotion. "But I didn't. And I have to believe that means something. That we were supposed to find each other, you and me. That everything we went through, all the pain and the loneliness, was leading us to that moment on the road." Elena leaned over and rested her head against his shoulder, watching the mountains turn gold in the morning light. "I used to think my story was a tragedy," she said. "The girl who married the wrong man, who lost everything, who almost died in the snow. But now I know it was a love story all along. It just took a little while to get to the good part. And that, perhaps, is the most important truth of all: our darkest moments do not define us, and our worst experiences do not have the final word." Elena Vasquez became Elena Monroe not because a billionaire rescued her, but because she refused to let her suffering destroy her capacity for love. She found strength she didn't know she had, took a chance on healing, and built a life more beautiful than anything she had imagined when she was lying in the snow with a newborn baby and no hope of survival. Her story is proof that it is never too late to start over, that good people exist even when the bad ones have hurt us, and that love, real, patient, consistent love, can find us in the most unexpected places. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you to believe in hope and second chances and the kind of love that shows up when you need it most, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe for more life-changing stories. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their story isn't over, that their best chapter might still be ahead, and that even in the coldest storms, warmth can find a way. Thank you for reading, and remember, you are stronger than you know, you are worthy of real love, and your story is still being written.